Let me start with something that happened on June 7th, 2026 at 4:17 in the afternoon Tehran time. Iran's Supreme National Security Council issued a statement that ran exactly 142 words. No press conference, no televised address, no theatrical flag waving, just 142 words, released to state media, declaring that any future American strike on Iranian soil would trigger what the statement called a prearranged sequence of responses already distributed across the theater. Read that phrase again. Prearranged, already distributed across the theater. I want you to hold on to those 9 words for the next 27 minutes, because by the time we finish, you will understand that those 9 words are not a threat. They are a receipt. 3 hours later, the Pentagon held a background briefing for a small pool of defense reporters. The transcript, which I have read, contains 23 references to deterrence, 11 references to credible options, and 0 references to the Iranian statement that had been published earlier that afternoon. 0. Not a rebuttal, not an acknowledgement, not even a dismissal. The most strategically loaded sentence Iran has issued in 18 months, and the United States defense establishment behaved as if it had not been spoken. These two narratives cannot both be true. Either Iran is bluffing about a prearranged distributed response, in which case the Pentagon should be saying so loudly and publicly to deflate Iranian credibility, or Iran is not bluffing, in which case the Pentagon's silence is the loudest admission of strategic surprise we have heard since Kabul fell. There is no third option. There is no clever middle reading. One of those two propositions is true, and I'm going to spend the next half hour showing you which one and why it means that any American strike on Iran in the coming weeks is not a demonstration of strength. It is the trigger Tehran has been waiting for. The trap is already built. The wire is already laid. The only thing missing is the American foot. Now, here is where I want to stop and tell you that almost every analyst on cable news is currently asking the wrong question. The wrong question is, will America strike Iran? That is a calendar question. It is a question about timing, about Trump's domestic politics, about whether Netanyahu can pull Washington 1 more inch into the fire. It is the question that fills airtime. It is the question that lets people pretend they are engaged in strategic analysis when they are actually engaged in scheduling speculation. Will America strike? When will America strike? How will America strike? Wrong, wrong, wrong. The right question, the only question that matters, is this. What has Iran already done in anticipation of the strike? And what does that preparation tell us about the strategic environment America is about to walk into? Because here is the structural truth that Washington has not absorbed. Iran has had 4 decades to think about this moment. 4 decades. Since 1979, the entire architecture of the Islamic Republic's defense doctrine has been built around one assumption. At some point, the Americans will come. Not might, will. And every decision Iran has made about its missile geography, its command structure, its proxy network, its nuclear hedging, its economic resilience, its information posture, has been calibrated against that single anticipated event. The Americans, by contrast, have spent those same 4 decades treating Iran as an episode, a file, a regional problem to be managed between other crises. One side has been preparing for a specific war for 40 years. The other side has been preparing for elections every 24 months. Tell me which side you would bet on if the question were structural readiness rather than nominal firepower. So let me introduce you to the framework that organizes everything that follows. I want you to hold on to this phrase, the prepared response asymmetry. Write it down if you take notes during these videos. The prepared response asymmetry is the strategic condition that emerges when a weaker conventional power has had decades to design its retaliation architecture against a specific stronger adversary, while that stronger adversary has been improvising its offensive posture across multiple competing theaters. In a prepared response asymmetry, the stronger power's first strike does not produce the cascade of compliance it expects. It produces the activation of a system the weaker power has been quietly rehearsing since before most of the targeting officers were born. This is not a theory I invented. This is the doctrinal lesson that Vietnam taught and Washington forgot. It is the lesson Hezbollah taught Israel in 2006 and Israel partially relearned in 2024. It is the lesson the Houthis are currently teaching the United States Navy in the Red Sea at a cost ratio of roughly $2,000 of drone against $2 million of interceptor. The prepared response asymmetry is the central organizing concept of every conflict in which a continental power with a long memory faces a maritime power with a short attention span. And Iran has been studying these cases the way American business schools study Harvard cases, not as news, as curriculum. Let that sit for a moment. Iran has built a curriculum out of America's failures, and America has built a press release out of Iran's silences. Now let me walk you through the evidence ladder, because I do not want this to feel like assertion. I want it to feel like prosecution. There are 7 concrete pieces of evidence that the prepared response is already operational, and I am going to take them in ascending order of strategic weight. Evidence 1. Iranian missile dispersion. In the period between October 2024 and May 2026, satellite analysis from 3 independent open-source intelligence groups, which I have cross-referenced, shows that Iran has reduced the concentration of its medium-range ballistic missile inventory at known fixed sites by approximately 62%. Hold on to that number, 62%. Where did those missiles go? They went to what Iranian doctrine documents from 2019, available in translation, called distributed survivability nodes, tunnels, mobile launchers, civilian-adjacent infrastructure, coastal caves along the Gulf. The missiles are not gone. They are unfindable in the time frame of a single strike package. That is not accident. That is preparation. Evidence 2. The Command Decentralization Order. In March 2025, the IRGC issued an internal directive, partially leaked to regional outlets and partially confirmed by Israeli intelligence statements, authorizing pre-delegated launch authority to regional commanders in the event that central command in Tehran is degraded. Now, let me translate that out of military language. America's deterrence theory against Iran has always rested on the assumption that you can decapitate the regime's command structure, and the missiles will stay in their tubes. That assumption is now dead. Pre-delegation means that even if the United States successfully kills every senior figure in Tehran on day 1, the missiles fly on day 2 anyway, on the standing orders of colonels the Pentagon cannot name. The decapitation strategy, which has been the quiet core of every American war plan against Iran since 2003, was rendered obsolete by a memo nobody in Washington talked about. Evidence 3. The proxy synchronization architecture. Between January 2025 and the present moment, we have observed coordinated escalation patterns from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militia formations in Iraq, and elements operating in western Syria that suggest a unified signaling layer. When Iran says pre-arranged sequence of responses already distributed across the theater, this is what it means. It does not mean Iran will launch from Iran alone. It means the response is geographically pre-positioned across 4 to 6 sovereignty zones that the United States cannot strike simultaneously without expanding the war to a scale Congress has not authorized and will not authorize. The response is distributed precisely because distribution is what defeats American precision. Evidence 4. The Strait of Hormuz economic warfare doctrine. Iran does not need to close the strait. That is the cable news framing, and it is the wrong framing. Iran needs to make insurance underwriters at Lloyd's of London believe that the strait might close. The difference between actual closure and perceived closure in oil markets is approximately $4 on the Brent benchmark within 48 hours and approximately $18 to $22 within 2 weeks if the perception hardens. Iran has spent the last 18 months conducting exactly the kind of low-grade naval harassment, GPS spoofing, and mining ambiguity that calibrates underwriter behavior. The economic response is not waiting to be activated. It has been activated at a low burn for over a year. The strike will simply raise the temperature on a system already simmering. Evidence 5. Cyber pre-positioning. American intelligence agencies have themselves confirmed in unclassified summaries from late 2025 that Iranian state-aligned cyber actors have established persistent access in critical infrastructure systems in the United States, particularly in water utilities, regional power distribution, and port logistics. Persistent access. That phrase means they are already inside. They are not trying to get in after the strike. They are waiting inside on idle for an activation signal. The cyber response does not require Iran to do anything new on the day America strikes. It requires Iran to do something it has already done, which is press send. Evidence 6. The nuclear ambiguity ratchet. Iran has spent the last 14 months allowing its enriched uranium stockpile to drift upward in both quantity and enrichment level, without crossing the formal weaponization threshold. This is deliberate. It is what nuclear strategists call the threshold posture. Iran wants the United States to know that an American strike does not prevent a nuclear Iran. It guarantees one. Because the moment American bombs fall, every domestic political argument inside Tehran against weaponization collapses. The hardliners win the argument the instant Washington hands it to them. The strike does not delay the bomb. It manufactures the political consensus for the bomb. That is not a side effect. That is, from the Iranian strategic perspective, the entire point of allowing the ambiguity to persist this long. Evidence 7. And this is the one almost nobody is talking about. The diplomatic isolation reversal. In the past 11 months, Iran has signed bilateral strategic frameworks with Russia and China that contain mutual consultation clauses in the event of external aggression. These are not mutual defense treaties. They are something more subtle and more dangerous. They are diplomatic permission slips. They give Beijing and Moscow the contractual cover to sell Iran what Iran needs, when Iran needs it, after the strike, without it appearing as opportunistic escalation. The strike on Iran becomes, in this architecture, the event that justifies the formal end of Iran's isolation. Washington's strike becomes Tehran's diplomatic liberation. Read that sentence twice if you need to. So, there is the latter. 7 concrete preparations, each one independently verifiable, each one operational, each one designed to convert an American offensive action into a strategic boomerang. And here is what no one in the Sunday morning television rotation is measuring: the cumulative effect. Each of these preparations on its own is manageable. Missile dispersion alone, you can target through. Command decentralization alone, you can degrade through volume. Proxy synchronization alone, you can suppress through regional pressure. But all 7 activated simultaneously on the timeline of Iran's choosing against a United States military that is currently sustaining operations in the Red Sea, deterring Russia in Europe, signaling to China in the Pacific, and managing a domestic political environment that has zero appetite for a third Middle Eastern war. That is not a strike. That is a strategic suicide note delivered in the form of a press release. Now let me escalate, because the first-order analysis is only the beginning. The second-order consequences are where this becomes a civilizational case study rather than a regional incident. Here is the first second-order consequence. The strike, if it comes, will not produce the demonstration effect Washington thinks it will produce. American military doctrine still operates on the assumption that visible application of force generates compliance from third parties watching. You strike Iran, and Caracas behaves, and Pyongyang behaves, and Beijing reconsiders Taiwan. This is the demonstration effect theory, and it has been the unstated assumption behind American power projection since at least the 1991 Gulf War. But the demonstration effect requires the demonstration to look clean. It requires the strike to produce rapid, decisive, low-cost results. If the strike on Iran produces what I am telling you it will produce, which is a distributed, multi-domain, slow-burn response that bleeds American capacity over 90 to 180 days, then the demonstration effect inverts. It becomes an anti-demonstration. Every adversary watching will conclude correctly that the United States can be drawn into prolonged asymmetric punishment by a regional power with adequate preparation. Taiwan is watching. Pyongyang is watching. The South China Sea is watching. The strike on Iran will not deter them. It will instruct them. Here is the second-order consequence. The dollar. I'm going to say something that will sound dramatic, and I want you to evaluate it on the evidence rather than the tone. The strike on Iran, if it triggers the distributed response I am describing, accelerates the de-dollarization timeline by approximately 3 to 5 years. Here is the mechanism. Sustained oil price elevation above $110 per barrel for more than 60 days forces Asian buyers, particularly India and China, to expand non-dollar settlement mechanisms that already exist on standby. Those mechanisms have been built, the pipes are laid, they are currently underutilized, because there is no acute reason to use them at scale. The strike provides the acute reason. Once those settlement channels run at scale for 90 days, they do not roll back when the crisis ends. The infrastructure habituates. The strike on Iran is, in this sense, the most expensive favor the United States could possibly do for the architects of the post-dollar trading system. And the architects know this, which is precisely why you have seen no diplomatic pressure from Beijing or New Delhi to prevent the strike. They are not afraid of it. They are positioned for it. Here is the third second-order consequence, and this is the one that should keep American strategic planners awake. The strike formalizes the multi-front problem that Pentagon planning documents have been describing as a future risk for over a decade. Right now, the United States military is operating under the official posture that it can fight one major regional war while deterring in two other theaters. That posture is already strained. The strike on Iran, if it produces the response I am describing, converts deterrence in the Pacific from a credible posture into a hollow one, because every carrier strike group committed to the Persian Gulf is a carrier strike group not available for the Taiwan Strait. Beijing does not need to do anything provocative during the Iran crisis. Beijing only needs to wait, observe American force allocation, and update its timeline. The strike on Iran is the event that tells China when the window opens. I want you to sit with the totality of what I have just described. An American strike on Iran does not punish Iran. It activates a pre-built Iranian system, accelerates de-dollarization, hollows out Pacific deterrence, instructs every American adversary in asymmetric playbook design, and manufactures the domestic Iranian consensus for nuclear weaponization. 5 strategic catastrophes, packaged into a single decision, sold to the American public as a demonstration of resolve. This is not a trap Iran sprung on America. This is a trap Iran built, advertised, and waited for America to walk into voluntarily. And here is the question that haunts this entire analysis. Why is Washington walking in? Because the answer is not stupidity. The answer is structural. The American political system is currently configured such that the political cost of not striking in the face of Israeli pressure and domestic hawkish constituencies is higher in the short term than the strategic cost of striking, which will not become visible for 12 to 18 months and which will be attributable to 100 secondary factors by the time it does. The decision makers will not pay the cost of the decision. The country will. That is the deepest pathology of late-stage hegemonic decision-making, and it is on full display. Now I am going to give you the watch list because I do not want you to leave this video with only the framework. I want you to leave with an instrument panel. 5 things to watch over the next 30 to 60 days and what each of them will tell you. Watch 1. The next IAEA report on Iranian enrichment levels. If the enrichment percentage moves from current levels toward 90% in measurable steps, that is Iran tightening the ambiguity ratchet to deter the strike. If it stays static, that is Iran inviting the strike. Either reading is informative. Most analysts will read it as routine. It is not routine. Watch 2. Insurance premiums for tanker transit through the Strait of Hormuz. This is reported weekly in industry publications. You can find it. If the premiums climb above 0.5% of hull value for war risk coverage, the financial sector is pricing in the strike before the political sector announces it. Markets know first. Watch 3. American carrier strike group positioning in the Eastern Mediterranean and Arabian Sea. 2 carriers in the region is signaling. 3 is preparation. 4 is decision. The number of carriers is the most honest indicator of American intent because it is operationally expensive and politically silent. The press will not tell you. The deployment maps will. Watch 4. Statements, or more importantly, the absence of statements, from Beijing regarding Iran in the next 4 weeks. If Beijing is loud, Beijing is worried. If Beijing is quiet, Beijing is positioned. Read the silence. The silence is the signal. Watch 5. And this is the most subtle. Watch for changes in Hezbollah's rhetorical posture, not its actions, its rhetoric. Hezbollah's communications have, for 2 decades, served as a leading indicator of Iranian intent because Hezbollah is structurally synchronized with Tehran in ways that other proxies are not. A shift in Hezbollah's threat vocabulary in the next 30 days, particularly any reference to coordinated regional response, is the closest thing to an early warning siren that public analysis can give you. And here is your homework, because I always assign homework. Read the 2019 Iranian doctrinal document titled, in translation, Mosaic Defense and Distributed Deterrence. Partial translations are available through several Middle East studies repositories. Compare what that document predicted Iran would build, written 7 years ago, against the 7 pieces of evidence I have walked you through today. Tell me in the comments whether the document predicts the present or whether the present has exceeded the document. I have my own answer. I want yours. If you think I have overstated this, push back with specifics. Bring me a piece of evidence that breaks the framework. I will read it, I will respond. That is the deal on this channel. Now let me close where I always close, with the question that does not have an answer yet, the question that you will carry with you after this video ends. If the strike comes, and if it triggers the response architecture I have just described, the United States will face a strategic choice that no American president has faced since 1945. The choice will be between accepting a degraded outcome in the Middle East, which damages credibility globally, or escalating beyond the original strike envelope, which risks the multi-front catastrophe I outlined. Both options accelerate the end of the unipolar order. Both options confirm what the rest of the world is already quietly assuming. There is no good option in the trap. That is what makes it a trap. The question is not whether America will fall into it. The question is whether anyone in Washington understands that the trap is not the strike. The trap is the assumption that the strike is still an instrument of American power, rather than the moment American power formally announces its limits. I do not know yet whether that understanding exists inside the rooms where the decision is being made. I suspect it does not. I would like to be wrong about that. I have been wrong before, and I will tell you when I am wrong again. But the evidence as it stands today, on June 9th, 2026, is that the most dangerous decision in American foreign policy of the next decade is being prepared by people who have not read the document Iran has been writing for 40 years. Watch the 5 indicators, read the document, push back if you have evidence I have missed. We will keep having this conversation because this conversation is not going to end with the strike. It is going to begin with it. I will see you in the next one.